I have no idea, but I'm going to get to the bottom of it. We've created a society where you can do, as long as you pander to one side of the political aisle, you have no accountability. But if you don't agree with us today, I'm not trying to be political, I'm just kind of giving you an essence about how foolish we are as a nation. Judge Kavanaugh, a justice. They were there. There were some folks outside of his house demonstrating that they're not happy with the decisions that he's been making, especially with Roe versus Wade. And when Kavanaugh got elected, or confirmed, Senate leader Chuck Schumer told Kavanaugh he's going to get what's coming to him. Well, today, outside in those demonstrators, a guy had a gun, a pistol, said he was going to shoot Judge Kavanaugh. We live in a society that has not just brought along, but is feeding this kind of foolishness. The verse 1 says that the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. Well, when you take out God, you take out accountability. You take out morality. And so we have a nation that has become foolish because we have kicked God out of government and the schools. And so we have become a nation of fools, so to speak, or a bunch of foolish people representing us. And so, listen, the fool has dulled their conscience. Let me ask you this. What is the purpose of one of those smoke alarms that we all have in our house? To warn you when there's a what? Fire. Now let me ask you something. If you take out the batteries of that smoke alarm, can it warn you? No. Our society has dulled the conscience that God gave us the same way as taking the batteries out of a smoke alarm. Our conscience is supposed to say, hey, what you're doing, you shouldn't be doing this. Because God gave us that conscience. We can go to Romans 1 where we read all about where God gave us this in creation. And so our society, the foolish, has dulled their conscience or seared their conscience to where nothing good, holy can penetrate anymore. The foolish are corrupt, he says in verse number 1. They are corrupt. They have done abominable works. I mean, what more abominable can we be than murdering, ripping folks out of the womb? What more abominable can we say that, Brother Mark, United States is not that bad? No, well, let's see here. We're told to celebrate sin. Whether that's fornication. Hey, pornography is celebrated in our country. Not only is it celebrated, it's celebrated, but it's the norm. If you don't look at it nowadays, you're considered weird. And so the works of our society are what verse 1 says. They're abominable. They do abominable things. They are no good. So the Lord looks down on humanity. Verse number 2, the Lord looked down from heaven upon the children of men to see. Now he knows, right? If there were any that did understand and seek God. So he's looking, it says, David writes that he's looking down. The psalmist writes, he's looking down. God's looking down. Listen, God is always looking down. All right, and so he says he's looking down to see if anyone understands on humanity. He's looking to and seeking to see if anyone is considering him. That's what it means to understand. Did understand and seek God. Does anyone consider God or even seek him? 2 Chronicles 16:9, for the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth to show himself strong in the behalf of them whose heart is perfect toward him. Listen, his eyes run to and fro on this earth. He's constantly looking at us. Do you consider me when you're making decisions? Are you seeking after me? Here he's saying, as David's writing this, he's like, no, they're not. He says they are all gone aside. He responds to his own question. There's none that consider him. They've all departed from him unto idolatry. Israel always had an issue with idolatry. Mankind always has an issue with idolatry. And we are no different. Believers, we can have issues with idolatry ourselves. I've said this many times. Our work can be idolatry. I was reading this thing earlier, was it yesterday or this morning? A guy takes crack cocaine to feed his workaholic. He's a workaholic, and he takes cocaine so he can be a workaholic, so he can stay at work. Listen, work can be an idol. Sports, work, career, politics, hobbies. If a hobby, listen, now I'm not trying to meddle, but if we are giving more towards our hobby than we are the Lord, we have an issue. The Lord comes first. We may enjoy, and I'm not saying you can't have hobbies, no. I'm saying what's important to us is what comes out of here. It's what this feeds. So listen, if we're going to spend this amount on our hobby, then the Lord better come first. But no, listen, idolatry, humanity's always had a problem with idolatry. He says they've all departed. That's what it means by they turn aside. They've all departed into idolatry. There's none that does good, no, not one. What is he saying? For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. That's what he's saying right here. He asks another question. Have all the workers of iniquity to no knowledge? He goes, is there no knowledge of me in all of you, all you sinners? Is there no knowledge of who I am? Well, there's a thing called Living Waters on YouTube. Now, I'm not 100% on board with Ray Comfort's theology, but he does a lot of interviews. Asks people if they believe in God. There's a lot of people out there that never heard of God. A lot of people out there, they've heard of Jesus because, Christmas and Easter and whatnot. Some of them believe that there is a God. They don't know who he is or that he's a person. Listen, there's a lot of folks out there that don't have any knowledge of God. Well, who are we to blame? Let's look in the mirror. We are. Our moms and dads are to blame. And so, and we're no better when we allow we're allowing in our country. Listen, we're a republic, not a democracy. The majority doesn't rule. Right? That's why we're a republic. And so, listen, we allowed this to happen. There's probably kids over here filled in these two schools, and this one that's about to open next year, the one down the street from us, filled with kids who have no idea about God. You know who their idea of God is? Marvel and DC. because gods, Thor, Superman, that's their, not only that, but all the anime that they have, all the different gods that they have in Japan, and Shintoism and Hinduism and all these other isms that these Asian cultures that put out these animes, that's what they're getting fed, folks. God lets us know we're all sinners. He knows the answer. The foolish devour the godly as bread. He says, look, he says in verse 5, there were they in great fear. Now let me ask you. I heard a great illustration how to describe the fear of God. God said it this way. The fear of God is like a parachute with a airplane going down. Your conscience tells you the airplane's going down, you need a parachute. Why do you run to that parachute? Because the parachute is going to save your life, right? Well, the fear of God is the same way. We're to run to Him because we're in that fear, that reverence for Him. We should be running to Him, but instead we're running away from Him. He says that all these people, they're not considering the counsel of the poor because He is their refuge. He said that they devour my people like they eat bread. Man, a lot of us like to eat bread, don't we? And if it's some good bread, whether it's the rolls over at Texas Roadhouse with some honey butter, or the cheddar biscuits that you get at Red Lobster, or even a slice of bread with some butter, huh, Brother Priest? You just devour it. It's one thing when I was a kid, I could devour bread. I would eat the rolls. I would put some honey on it, and I would just devour it. He said, that's what this world is doing to my people. Listen, our nation is doing the same thing to believers. They're trying to get rid of us. They're doing that in Asia. They're doing that in the Middle East. All over the world. And then David says, salvation, he can't wait for it. See, Jesus, he's talking about the day of the Lord. What's the day of the Lord from Revelation? When Jesus comes back to rule and to reign, right? He's wanting that. He's ready for that. And he says Israel's going to rejoice. Jacob, Israel, they're going to rejoice. Yes, it's going to be great when Jesus returns. He is going to rule this world. But until then, folks, we live in a rotten society. And we are to be the light in that rotten society. Because, listen, if we don't, there's a lot of churches out here that are not being lights either. We're to be that light to Baytown, to Houston, to Texas, to the United States, and everywhere else. Because there's a lot of fools around here who do not believe in any kind of accountability. I mean, they don't believe in God. Their parents raised them to, I don't want to have them raised this way. I want them to choose for themselves. Well, nature tells you that they're going to choose sin. They're going to choose to run from God because they don't know Him. They weren't brought up to know Him. The difference between a teenager that runs to God and a kid that runs to God and a kid that runs away from God is a kid who doesn't know who God is. And we've got to teach that generation. We have 2 brand new babies, Flynn and Ellie. Whenever Brother Kyle and Samantha and Jason and Lauren decide to dedicate their babies, We as a church got to stand up and say, we're going to help to teach these kids who God is. Not about God, but who He is. Because that's what we want to teach, who God is. And show these kids that He's an awesome and a good God and deserves reverence. Foolishness, the foolish in God. They may be laughing now, but they will not be laughing long. Father, as we conclude tonight, Lord, I pray that we as your people